We ain't really changing anything. We got some paper coverage.
will be eventually with this.
Good evening, everyone. It's a little bit past 7 o'clock, and even though I know that we're enjoying our social hour, we need to begin what we're here for tonight, which is our Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Henderson, and I'm with KHMB Radio, the sponsor of our City Council candidates debate this evening. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. And I would like to, because I know at the end into the night, so I think it's only right that I give some recognition and some thanks. Ride and Julio from the Boys and Girls Club for the facility. John and Don Earlham for the video that they're doing in the back. Also the fellow, I don't know his name, but the young man who is helping with sound, we certainly appreciate that. And of course all of the candidates that came as well. And by the way, can you hear me okay? Okay, good, okay. Thank you, you're old, because you know what that Pardon me? I do. Oh, and I also want to thank our person who's going to be our official timer this evening. Raise your hand, Mr. Timer. Okay. And I think it's probably good to review that right now, so again, you know what it means when he holds up multiple colored cards. When you have spoken for a minute, he's going to hold up the blue card. And if you are speaking for 1 minute and you've used up 45 seconds and you're heading into the stretch, he will hold up the card that says 15 seconds. Okay? And when your time has expired, like a parking meter, he will hold up that which says stop. Okay? After which Guido will come and visit you. Okay. What are our expectations here this evening? In advance, I have to tell you that this format is a little bit different than the traditional format. Many of you are well aware of the Women League of Voters and how they conduct their forums and the questions that are asked and audience participation. And probably the majority are in that vein. And so we thought that we wanted to do something different just because every one of the others has that predictable format to it. So we wanted to come up with something that maybe was a little bit more edgy and that would elicit more of a exchange and debate, if you will, between the candidates. Because after all, the purpose of this is for us to get to know the people that are running for city council. So to do that, the more that we can get them to speak to us and tell them their platforms and what they believe and why they believe it, then we're all better educated because of it. We are going to start with an opening statement that will be a minute for each individual. We will then proceed to some questions that we have for them, questions they have not heard or seen, and they will be allowed a 2-minute response time for that. Then, after each person has responded to the question, then we are going to allow each of the candidates an additional minute to have their own follow-up with anyone that they choose to ask a question of, if they want greater clarity or if they take issue with something that was said, that they will have an opportunity to do that. Then, something that I don't know has ever been done before, we have actually asked the candidates to write out a question to another candidate at the table. It can be anybody they want. When that question is asked, the person who is asked the question will have 2 minutes to respond, and then the person who asked the question will have an additional minute. And then at the very end, there will be a 2-minute summary that each individual will have. So, with that having been said,
I noticed some empty chairs. Is there some explanation for the absence of the comments?
oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm very sad and disappointed to say that the two incumbents will not be here this evening because they said they had other pressing things that they had to do. So, but you know, they were invited, and for whatever reason, they said that they could not join us for this debate.
Yeah, would you like to know the reason, rather than leaving it so vague and confusing?
Well, yes, the reasons that were given, Mr. Alfano is at a SAM meeting. He has an ad hoc committee, some committee that he's involved in, and he said that it was scheduled for tonight and that it would be impossible to rearrange it. And Rick said that he had travel plans that were already there and he couldn't change them. So unfortunately, we're sorry that they can't join us because it would have made for obviously a more spirited debate. And I think that you would have enjoyed it more because we would have had, again, more interaction, and perhaps we would have learned things and been better educated. But yes, to answer your question, and thank you for reminding me, I kind of went down the track there and I forgot about the 2 empty seats. So. And also thank you for the gentleman that gave me his glasses. I forgot mine. And, okay. So, why don't we start with Don, and we will have a 1-minute opening statement in order, please.
Before we start, can you tell me how to work this?
You press this when you want to talk.
When the red's on, you're talking?
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. My name is Don Prestos. I've been in Half Bay for about 40 years. I taught at the high school, economics and government. And I started an environmental consulting business in 1989 to the present, which I've worked either full-time and part-time depending on what years you want to take. I got into running for the city council this year. Let me start by saying I came to a lot of city council meetings over the years in this very room. And years ago, our feeling was that the tourists were going to come no matter what. And instead of just leaving their garbage, we should do something so they would leave their money as well. And for us, for the residents. And the last 10 or 15 years, they have left their money, but we've had a lot of lawsuits and legal fees and so on. And now we're starting to get money to do things like roads and stuff, and I want to continue that. I want to give back to this community what is given to me, and hopefully when I am gone, that this is a better place than when I found it. Thank you.
Oh, yes, just proceed.
My name is Harvey Rarback, and I really appreciate that Jim is arranging this. It's a great opportunity, and I think the fact that the incumbents aren't here is going to make it a lot less of a chance for us to really find out why the city council has acted the way it has in the last 5 years, I guess. In a minute, it's very hard to explain all the things that I would change about the council, but if I could just summarize, I think they have not been honest or transparent with us. I think they have not spent our money wisely, and I think they haven't followed the law in many cases. So these are all things that I think we need to change, and if you honor me by electing me, I will be more transparent with you, I'll spend your money wisely, and I will obey the law. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Deborah Penrose, and I'm running as a reform candidate for Half Moon Bay City Council. I'm a candidate because the current council has not been listening to us. As a practicing physician for 33 years, I have a highly developed sense of hearing. I listen. Our local government can only help our town grow and prosper, and all of our neighbors, if our neighbors are heard. If we're heard, then the council has to heed what they hear. We have to stop the hidden agenda form of government. We have to stop the outsourcing that we do so readily and that's so expensive. We need to use the amazing local talent that we've got here and develop task forces in our town to figure out how to deal with our huge issues. The number one on my agenda is traffic congestion. So what I say is let's work together to fix it. Thank you.
But I haven't started yet.
Should be green or yellow.
I paid you before we came in. Good evening, my name is David Ablovi, and we've got a lot to cover tonight that's not going to be summarized in a minute, so frankly I'm not even going to try. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court denied cert for 11 civil rights cases throughout the nation, and as of tonight, 24 out of our 50 states, for all intents and purposes, 2/3 of our population is entitled to marry whatever their sexual orientation. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've got a lot of negative stuff to go over. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the things that I see wrong in our local government. But there's hope. We're getting there. 20 years ago, if I had told you marriage is going to be legal in all states, or we're getting there, 20 years later, you would have said no. But we're getting there, locally and nationally. We need to maintain our passion and our interest and our commitment to leaving this place better than we found it. And if we do that as part of this process tonight, I think we got a long way to go, or a good direction to go in. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Ruddock. I've lived in Half Moon Bay more than 25 years. I bought my first home here, I got married here, and I raised my 2 children in local public schools. And I'm running again because I'm worried. Half Moon Bay is a great place to call home, but I'm still worried. I'm worried about the future because I would like to continue to live here and grow old here and potentially have my children be able to afford to live here. And I see that we have a couple of real serious problems, and that's not just housing affordability, but housing diversity, different places for different people to live. But I see also that we have, terrible traffic congestion. And I don't think we're going to build our way to affordable housing, and I don't think we're going to widen our roads sufficiently to accommodate the kind of growth that the current council would like to see. So this is, very boring, but this is my zinger. I'm very interested in us pursuing well-crafted policies and careful, thoughtful, innovative planning, and we have to start today.
It is a challenge, isn't it, to be able to speak within a minute. Okay, now you're going to have a chance to speak a little bit longer. Now we get to go to 2 minutes. So you have 2 minutes to answer this question. Mr. Timer, if you'll go accordingly. The first question is, in February 2011, this city council transferred liability from the city to Half Moon Bay residential and business property owners on all sidewalks across town. So all of the liability has been transferred from the city to residential property owners and businesses on all sidewalks. In 2013, a local resident who was unaware of the transfer was sued for $350,000 by a person who allegedly tripped, fell, and broke her arm in front of the local's home, which settled for $100,000. Question: how do you feel about this and why? And let's start on the other end with Ms. Ruddick.
As far as I'm concerned, sidewalks are a public good. The city has a public easement over them, and they should be responsible for the legal liability of the sidewalks. Now, there are really two different issues here. There's the maintenance and upkeep of sidewalks, which by state law is actually the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. The second issue is legal liability, in the case of accidents. So in 2011, the city, without much ado, no public notice except a typical ordinance, one hearing to introduce and one hearing to adopt, foisted this liability onto homeowners. So it became a surprise to this one person to get this claim of $350,000. She felt abandoned. It was 3 days before her wedding. So it was it was a display of callousness on the city's part to do it, and she was the poster child for that. So I would want us to take back sidewalk liability right off the bat, if elected. The issue of maintenance and upkeep is quite different. Many cities handle it differently. But again, that's a chance for public conversation about, do we share the costs? Does the homeowner do it when they sell their home? So there's lots of different kinds of solutions depending on the community and the needs and demographics of the residents. But the city has to want to have that conversation. So sidewalk liability for the city, yes. Maintenance and upkeep, that's something we can address together, and I think we should. Again, what they did was emblematic of not listening and just taking it upon themselves to make very important, very costly decisions on our behalf without consulting us.
Sorry. For those of you who heard last week's debate, I'm alive now, but I'm still not quite out of the woods. This was covered at last week's debate as well, and the incumbents aren't here, but I'm going to speak for them anyway because they spoke about it at last week's debate. Both of them essentially articulated the idea, two things in specificity. The first one was, we were broke, we needed to generate money, but now that we're not, we'll reconsider it. That was actually Mr. Kowalczyk's offering. Mr. Alfano wasn't quite on that same page. The second one, and they both said this, which I found very interesting, was that this just codifies state law. We didn't actually pass a resolution passing ownership or liability onto the homeowners or the business owners. It was just, a formality that, okay, it's not. The state, it is permitted to do this under the state. It's entirely permissible, but it's inequitable. How many of you have sidewalks on your property, wherever you live? How many have sidewalks on your property? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you get screwed, and the people who don't have sidewalks on their property don't, right? So even if the city is saying, we need more money, and this is how we're going to generate money, it's not equitable at all. So your homeowner rates are going to go up, and I've heard anecdotal evidence that some of them have. They didn't actually need the money, to be clear. And this goes to the theme of the core of one of my huge disconnects with this council is they're outsourcing everything. What's left that our city does? And frankly, if you're going to outsource every single commodity service, fire service, sewage, you name it, if you're going to outsource everything, then let's just disincorporate the city and call it good. And I'm not advocating that at all, just to be clear. But if that's what the city's going to do, then why have a city at all? We've outsourced everything: planning, purchasing, human resources, sidewalks. What's left? Thank you.
Yeah, I can echo what Debbie Ruddock and David Ablovi both said. I have no fault with anything they've said. I think everything they said is right on target. I would say that one of the issues we have to look at is if we can give the liability, if we take the liability back as a city and have the government assume that, we still have the problem of sidewalk repair. Now, that's not something that should be done on a case-by-case basis. Like the rest of the infrastructure in our city, we need to attack it as a citywide problem. That's going to be something of a problem. The people in Alsace-Lorraine don't have sidewalks. Those of us in downtown, most of us do have sidewalks. The people in Casa del Mar have sidewalks. But it's not evenly spread. So what we have to do is bring the citizens together, all of the citizens, and reach consensus. Some of us will be giving more than others, but we have to decide as a group what we want for our city.
What
I've got to say.
what she said, what he said, what she said, they're all right. If I'm elected, one of the very first acts I will, ordinances I will repeal is this crazy deal where the city council took, foisted liability on the homeowners. There's no reason it should have happened. The city is all equipped with lawyers and all the infrastructure to defend any lawsuit. It is for the public good, so it just has to get repealed, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yes, I believe sidewalks are like roads. It's a public good. I think that the city should take liability for them. I didn't like that song. I also believe that with liability, I wouldn't take liability for something if I wasn't going to be in charge of the maintenance. And so whether there is a joint sharing of that maintenance as far as a financial point of view, that may be to be worked out. But if the city's going to take liability for the sidewalks, they're going to be in charge of the maintenance as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, the reason originally that we had set up the format that we did, because we were hoping for more engagement and diversity of opinion. Don't think we have it on this one, so I don't think there's really any need to offer people a minute to respond to something that somebody else said, since it basically corresponded with what they said. Somebody get him a new phone. But, you know, the time that we've saved, we can use maybe down the line for expanded dialogue on another subject that maybe would be a little bit more passionate and get some involvement that way. So let's proceed then to question number 2, which is as follows. In June of this year, we were asked to vote on 2 separate city-sponsored measures regarding our Main Street Bridge. One, to preserve it, and one, to give the city carte blanche to demolish and replace it after years of controversy. This matter was initiated by a city consultant whose firm benefited by the contract the city subsequently signed with URS to demolish and replace our historic bridge. Question: what are your thoughts on this, and what, if anything, would you have done differently? And we'll start with Don.
I voted no on both of those propositions. You don't start by saying we need a new bridge. It seems like it was, we have money, the bridge must be bad. And that's not logical to me. So I believe that we should test the bridge, see what is wrong with it, if anything, and work from there. If it's something wrong with it and it can be repaired, then I think we should repair it. And if it's not repairable, then I believe we should build a new bridge. And there's a little caveat to that, because sometimes when you're fixing something, it can almost cost the same amount of money as building a new one, number one. And number two, when it comes to bridges, a 5 or 10 year fix is not adequate. If it needs to be fixed, it's gonna have to be what bridges are made to, 50 years out. We're gonna leave this for future generations. So that's my thought about it. What I would have done differently if I was on the council was to explain to people, so I wouldn't have done the same thing. I would have said, this bridge is old, we have to have it tested, and based on those test results, make a public policy what to do with the bridge. And make sure that everybody was clear, everybody say that in a very clear manner, and everybody knows what we're doing. And once you do that, I think you have positive dialogue rather than negative dialogue. Thank you.
The bridge issue is emblematic of lots of the things I started my opening statement with. 2 years before the city said that they were soliciting input about what to do with the bridge, they had already signed a contract with URS for over $1 million. The title of that contract includes the word "destroy the bridge." They didn't explain that, they didn't make a big deal about it, but that was the direction that they were heading. Then we get these comments from some city council people that 30,000 bridges have collapsed. Another council member said, if a child falls in and dies, I don't want it to be on my conscience. It's that sort of disrespect for our intelligence that I think is really wrong. You probably don't know that David Ablovi worked hard to get the bridge on the Register of Historic Places. What you also don't know is that the council wanted to not have it on the register. Can you imagine that craziness? So I worked hard to get signatures to support Measure F. The council has claimed that Measure F that they put on the ballot was the Citizens Initiative. The reality is the Citizens Initiative would have gone on the November ballot, and the city council jump-started it so that we wouldn't see at the same election the incumbents up for election and the bridge measure at the same time. They wanted to get it over with so people weren't going to remember it, but we will remember it. Thank you.
The fiasco that was the bridge. I voted for Measure F, but I voted for Measure F feeling very, very uneasy. I talked to maybe 10 different people about what was going on. I was not involved politically. I wasn't with David's group that was doing all the investigation. I was just talking to citizens around town, some of whom were bridge engineers, some of them were just interested parties, about what's happening. And I kept getting different stories from everybody about what was going on. What would I have done differently? I would not have had a Measure E. I would not have had a Measure F. I would not have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on preliminary studies. I'd have talked to the citizens in town, come to some sort of a consensus about how important it is that we maintain our historic bridge, talk to the downtown business people, figured out how much of a disruption they could handle. Then I'd have done the definitive study. As a physician, if somebody comes into me and says, I think I've got cancer, doc, and I look at them and I examine them and I think, gee, they may have cancer, I don't go ordering x-rays. I order CAT scans. You do it the right way. That's all.
First, I'd like to thank Harvey, kind of negated me needing to speak on line number 1 here. I think something that really hasn't been addressed about the bridge in many dialogues that people have had is the idea that the reason we got the bridge, the reason the bridge evolved the way it did and became what it was because of the consultant mentality that the city has put in place over the last 4 years. CSG Corporation, we've spent $3.2 million with CSG. That's the city engineer over the last 3.5 years. okay? CSG comes in and says, the bridge is falling, the bridge is falling. Well, they're motivated. Whether they did or not isn't the point. The point is they're motivated. They make money. If they have more work to do, they had more work to do because the bridge was falling. They had to write proposals. They had to write grant funding and a whole bunch of other stuff. When the city spent $3,000, $4,000 of our money to fight my nomination to the National Register of Historic Places, think about that for a second, okay? I mean, just think about what that takes from a governmental standpoint. They're already they've already dug themselves into a hole that's 300 feet deep. And that was their approach, was to spend more, what? Consultant money. It was the bridge project manager, it was the environmental consultants, and it was URS that spent that money writing letters to the state trying to get them to essentially not approve the nomination. One of my biggest core ideas that I'm focusing on going into this election, and if, God help us all, I get elected, is the idea of returning management of city governmental departments to individual people who own the problems and own the issues for those individual departments, people who do not profit when a project is made, people who do not have a financial interest in the outcome of any of the advice that they're giving to the community or to the council or to us. That's actually the lesson. If you really want to cut down to the lesson of the Main Street Bridge, for me, all the other stuff is entertaining, but that's the lesson of the bridge in a nutshell.
So I agree with everyone else that the issue was badly handled at the city. And to me, it focuses the question, who can we trust to listen? I sat at several bridge meetings over the course of last year, and there were 100 or more people who stood up at the podium and asked questions, had engineering degrees, had business degrees, made comments about the bridge, offered ideas, offered to spend money on testing. And basically the city ignored it. They ignored hundreds of years of citizen experience. And believe me, there's plenty of talent in this town, as you know. So they ignored their citizens. They rubber-stamped bad advice from consultants. It was clear at the meeting that they'd already made up their mind to demolish the bridge. So, you know, there's a pattern here of the city council just not listening, being insular, and keeping us, you know, away from the table. And that's really problematic. The other question it raises is, who can you trust to wisely manage our tax dollars? Again, as David pointed out, we blew, you know, through $500,000 on consultants before even having a conversation about whether to test or not. We can't afford that in this town. We have a $14 million general fund budget. We're small, we've outsourced everything. I think the city has managed things very badly, and the sidewalk issue and the bridge issue, you know, bring that front and center, I think. So I would have asked questions right out of the gate, like, is there a problem? What is the problem? What are the approaches to solving it? How much does it cost? What do the people think who are affected by it? What does the general public think? And, you know, and then, you know, test if you find that there's a problem. But, you know, they had it bass-backwards as far as I was concerned, so not happy about it.
Now, again, we've allowed a minute for further discussion if you want to comment on something that somebody else said. However, I'm going to ask you to vote on whether or not you want to do that, or do you feel we can move on? Is there anything that needs to be, you know, okay.
I'll argue with Harvey.
Okay. We're in harmonic convergence at this time. Okay, very good. Okay.
I would ask a question.
Of someone in particular?
Yes, okay.
Sure.
Is that the format?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm glad that-
So you can address somebody else that spoke to that issue.
I just want clarification. When I agree with citizen input, but when Deborah was talking, I wanted to make, I guess I want to say, are you suggesting that citizens determine whether the bridge is safe, or should we get someone from the outside to do that? That wasn't clear to me.
You know, the citizens will not determine whether the bridge is safe. You know, the city engineer, hopefully he works in-house, you know, will help the city, you know, establish a process for determining that. But You know, a bridge is not just a bridge. This bridge is historic, it's been here a long time, people have emotional attachments to it. On top of that, there's a lot of talent here that can be tapped for different points of view, and I think it's incumbent upon the City Council to listen. I mean, they represent us, they are our agents. If we wanted to just be a collection of individual homeowners and business owners, without being in a city, we can do that, but we're a city, so we expect the city to act as our representatives, and they don't do that. They think they know better. So I think we're a partnership, we're not adversaries, and I have no problem whatsoever with getting as much, public input as people want to give. And that doesn't mean we don't fix problems in an emergency or what have you, but we're in this together. We're partners, and I want to feel like the people who are in charge, I can trust them that they will listen and, make fact-based decision-making, once they take in all input.
And I should have clarified once again that these are 1-minute responses, and I don't think our timer really knew that when we respond.
Okay.
I could tell that look of confusion upon your face, my friend. So if anybody else wants to comment on anything somebody else said, you may, but we're looking for 1-minute response on this. Thank you.
It'll be,
Okay.
That was another question, I think, but, so, to make this just a very short response, I don't care if it's someone who lives in the community or lives in Alaska, as long as they don't have a financial interest, when they say the bridge is falling, the bridge is falling, that they're going to generate $40,000 of revenue as a reward for making that judgment. I would simply like the individual or individuals to be disinterested financially in the outcome of what they're articulating or advocating for. That's all I got. Thanks.
Anyone else care to use a minute?
I just want to, just by saying, I just think that whoever it is has to be someone that's, number one, does it for a living, and number two, is willing to write a report and put his seal on that report and put his license and his reputation on the line. That's all I'm saying. That's spending the people's money wisely. Thank you.
Won't take a minute to explain that I think it's always a bad mistake when you rely completely on high-priced consultants. Consultants make money, as David said, when they consult, and you have to use a little bit of common sense and fiscal prudence and not just go along with anything that a consultant is suggesting you do. So that's a pattern that I hope we could change.
Ditto.
I was going to say you're the odd person out. If we open this up, we're going to go down a rat hole unless you have a procedural matter you'd like to address.
For that lovely sentiment, but yes, I'll hold that until later, seeing as how I'm the rat.
No, people have already asked, can we ask questions? It's not designed for people to write questions, and that's something that is usually done with the Women's League of Voters. We wanted to do something different. That's why we established a whole different menu of the way that we're trying to get more interaction so people can maybe even get into a debate category. How unique that people would actually debate an issue. So that's the purpose there. So did you answer, or you have a comment?
Vis-a-vis her comment, her question, since we have reached such unanimity on the issues, and we may continue to reach unanimity on the issues tonight, perhaps to make it open up to debate a little bit, maybe we should at the end take some questions from the audience. Is that possible?
I'll tell you what, after we exhaust our questions, if there's time, I'll be more than open to that.
Thank you.
Fair enough? Okay. If not, why not? Okay. Moving right along then, let us proceed to the next question before us, and that is as follows. Some have accused the council of committing 5 assaults on our downtown merchants starting in 2010 with a 1-cent 7-year sales tax boost, followed by parking meters, a 1/2 cent 3-year sales tax boost, the approval of the demolition and replacement of our Main Street Bridge, and now Measure O, an extension of the 1/2 cent 3-year sales tax bump on this ballot. Question, do you feel this council is business supportive? If so, why so? If not, why not? And we'll start with Don and work our way down.
Do I think that they are business supportive? I don't know what their motivation is. I don't, they're trying to collect money, and they're trying to collect money because we're in the red, trying to pay off debt. I have said that I would support lightly Measure O, and after it's sunsetted, I will not support it again unless it is for a particular use, a dedicated use. Because I think that once we start these taxes, they go on and on and on, and then the council will lose fiscal responsibility. But I don't know enough. I believe that the money that's coming from the sales tax is helping to supplement funds to pay off the bond. And I think I've said, once that bond is, and I don't know the intricacies of that because I'm not on the board, but I said after that bond is paid off, I will not support the sales tax after that point, and unless it's a dedicated tax, meaning you, the residents, know what it's for, and you say, yes, we will tax ourselves for this particular thing. That is democracy, and that's what I believe in. Thank you.
If you look around town, you're going to see a lot of no and O signs. Those signs were paid for by merchants. They don't want Measure O, and I agree with them. Let me just tell you my whole philosophy about sales tax. Measure K, 4 years ago, which was supposed to be a 1-cent increase, and would allow us to keep our local police department. The mayor at the time, I think, cried when she said that if Measure K didn't pass and we lost our police department, it would be a tragedy beyond words. The reality is that we have a wonderful police service now from the county that can give us lots of services that we didn't have before, and the political influence we used to have with our police department is gone. So that was a good thing that Measure K didn't pass. Measure J, the half-cent increase from 2 years ago, passed because it was an emergency. We were in dire fiscal constraints. Well, now the argument is we need a library. We need to fund Pilarcitos Creek Bridge. We need to fund this. We need to fund that. Sales taxes are inherently wrong because they're regressive. They hurt poor people more than the rich people. So I don't like sales taxes, and I don't like sales taxes that are being promoted as a reason to build a library or to fund other things that can be funded in other ways. Thank you.
Yeah, I would vote no on Measure O for similar reasons. It's a regressive tax. It hurts the poor more than it does the people that have more money. I did a little research today, and I can't remember which town it was, but of the 6 towns surrounding us, San Mateo, I think it was Millbrae, Burlingame, Redwood City, San Carlos, we're the only town with a 9.5% sales tax. Their sales tax is not 9.25, it's 9.0%. It's a full 0.5% higher. Our downtown business merchants need the business. We're not going to get all the business from the tourists. We've got locals who now commute over the hill. 78% of our working force commutes over the hill. And guess where they shop? And guess where they spend their money? Over the hill. There's more variety, that's true. But You add the tax to that, and it makes it even more impossible for local people to shop locally. I'm also against any tax that is not a dedicated tax. God knows what they'll do with the money if it passes. Maybe we'll fix a bridge, maybe we'll build a supermarket, maybe we'll start a shopping center. Who knows? Maybe it'll go to the library. It's not enough to fund the library. It's a small amount of money, and it's not nearly enough to fund the library, so that's not a good excuse. So I'd say no on no.
I'm going to hopefully speak loudly enough. I want to deconstruct Measure O for a second. So here's Measure O, which is going to make at most $1 million a year. And the City Council is telling us Measure O is going to fund the new library. What's really going to happen is, so this is our general fund. This is the $10 million of bonds or something that we're going to need to buy, or sell rather, to get our library. And what Measure O is going to do, they're going to put it into the general fund. The $10 million goes there, and then we have now $22 million of debt to pay off because of the 20-year bond issue. Measure O for 3 years will pay the approximately $1.25 million of debt service for the library for 3 years, right? So we've incurred $22 million of liability, and Measure O will pay off a whopping 3 years of it. Has everybody got that? Can I erase that? So I did some thinking, and I did some research. How many of you know that we have $8.25 million of cash sitting in an account as a result of something the City Council did 4 years ago? Anybody? We have $8.25 million sitting in the sewer capital fund right now, because the City Council raised taxes or raised rates on the sewer a total of 62% approximately 4 years ago. It's cash. It's sitting in the fund. We take that $8.25 million, we put it into a library fund by making a loan. And then we take the general fund and we pay over a 20-year period $500,000 a year. No interest charges. We're just paying back the loan. Oh, was that two at the same time? Correct. All right, I hope somebody will follow up with this and I'll finish off the plan. The point is, I've got a plan that'll save the town $12 million, that'll cut sewer rates by 25%, that'll buy us a new library that we can start building today. We don't have to wait for all this other crap to come to fruition, and the money's sitting there in the bank ready to go.
This is a 2-minute response. You're on the original question, though.
Right. I'd like to answer the question about, is the city business friendly? And I would say no. And so, the parking meter issue is one example. The bridge issue is a second example. But not many people know that the downtown business owners, and really any business owner in town, is also liable for sidewalk liability, for accidents and stuff like that. So there's another example. But commercial rents are still very high. You see vacancies on Main Street. It's hard for somebody to come into town and actually be able to afford to start a business, an small independent business, which would be wonderful if, young people could see that as an option, but rents are too high. We've seen that the city did nothing really to stop GoPro camera from leaving. You had, a couple of different small high-tech businesses here who have gone, over the hill because the city wasn't cooperating on identifying a piece of land or providing infrastructure that might support them. Not interested in that. And then you don't see the city sort of actively planning to make it easier to start new businesses and provide infrastructure like maybe super high-speed internet that might attract small businesses, high-tech businesses, homegrown sorts of businesses. You just don't see a sort of a proactive approach to that. So I would definitely say, based on all of the above, that this city is not business-friendly. Very, very little support for local businesses is my experience. Now, I'm not a local business person, but it's what I've heard and it's what I've seen and read in the review, and I don't like the pattern, so happy to have you counter me.
Okay, this is where we,
Can I add?
I'm sorry?
Can I add something? Do I still have time, or is...
Well, sure. If you have time, use it.
So in the case of Measure O, that was established because of a fiscal emergency, and now that the city is in somewhat rosier fiscal state, they want to continue it, but using the emergency justification. I'd say if the city is in a good financial condition, that we ought to ease up on the sales taxes. It'll help businesses and it'll help residents maybe be more interested in shopping here. It's not a lot. Some people say it's a small percentage of, individual purchases. With cars, it's something different entirely. But I think it's not helpful. And I think we ought to ease up on the sales taxes. So I'm not a big fan of Measure O as it stands. So.
Anybody who's a baseball fan, when the umpire starts walking to the mound, they're supposed to break it up. Okay, this is where we allow a 1-minute response to anything that has been said by anybody else at the table. So starting with Don, if you have a 1-minute comment on anything else that was said, you are invited to say on.
David's right about the library. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, except that people should decide. What I said before, when the Beechwood bonds are paid off, if the people decide to pay another ½ or a cent or whatever, or another tax to build a library, then it's the people's will. And it shouldn't be hidden. That's all I have to say about it.
I want to talk a little bit about the library. You all got this puff piece from the city council. They seem to come out every election cycle. Beautiful picture of this putative library that doesn't fit in with the coast at all. That's going to cost, I don't know, $25 million. Depends on who you talk to. If you are interested, you should check out the Mitchell Park Library in Palo Alto. That was another kind of library that was built with an edifice complex. And what happened, the city is proud of the fact that more than 2,000 people put their input into this structure. But think about it for a second. If you were building your house and you asked people to come in, what would you like to be put in granite countertops, blah, blah, it just goes on and on if there's no fiscal prudence about it. So we really have to be fiscally prudent in terms of things like this, building this library.
Ditto.
I'm going to post the details on the plan on Talk About later tonight. I actually had hoped to put it up on the screen for everybody to see here, but that's not going to happen. The crux of it is, to me, is not that my plan is either workable or not, or that it's brilliant or stupid. The point is that I was able in a couple days by myself to come up with an alternative to the narrative that the story, or the narrative that the city is giving about Measure O, and how, Mr. Kowalczyk said at the last meeting, if you're against Measure O, you're against the library. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not against the library. I am against saying you're going to buy a $25 million library with $3 million of revenue. I have an issue with that, because I've never been able to make that math work in my experience. But so this will go up if you're interested. Take a look on the review on the Talk About section after we're done here.
So we can ask a question or something.
Yes, you have 1 minute to comment on something that somebody else has said.
So I'd like to know more about your plan, actually. So it doesn't involve going to the voters for consent on financing. What does it use besides a loan?
So it uses the cash, the equity, the asset that we have sitting in the bank right now doing nothing, that was basically a construct of the city council saying we needed to have a higher capitalization for the sewer. Sewer rates have gone from per man, woman, and child in the last 4 years, 3 years actually, they've gone from $200 to $500 each. And so at this point we've got it. We can't give the money back, right? Don brought up, one of them brought up, Measure O, or taxes and undoing stuff that's been done. We can lower the sewer charge rate at this point. Going forward, we can use that money for something, and the question is, what are we going to use it for? I mean, unless there's a sewer apocalypse coming that we don't know about, how are we going to burn through $8 million? And we're not actually throwing the money away, we're just loaning it to the general fund to purchase the library. Because it's an internal loan, there's no interest. Why would we charge interest to ourselves? So that's the big savings, is the bond measure that again, the city doesn't want to talk about or doesn't want to speak about. They're going to have to get the money from somewhere. So the bond measure is going to have an interest rate, and the current financing scheme is $12 million of debt service on the total measure. So,
But is it not true that money in the general fund cannot be absolutely guaranteed by the force of law to be used to pay interest or anything, really?
There's no guarantee that the general fund could eventually default, and then we'd have to sell the bonds. So worst case is we get 5 years out and something blows up or whatever else, and we end up selling bonds to cover the rest. So it doesn't, I mean, and again, this is just an idea, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting that we should run down and adopt this tomorrow. I'm just saying that there are alternatives out there, and we've got almost $10 million in the bank. And actually, by the end of this fiscal year, we'll have more than $10 million in the bank. Again, waiting for sewer apocalypse, which I just love saying, but work.
I'll just ask David, can those funds be used for anything? Is it a separate fund, or does it need to be sewer related?
That's a great question, and so the answer to that question is you can't, because sewer is a proprietary fund, my understanding is you cannot transfer the money from the proprietary fund to the general fund and just say, okay, it's done. What you can do is the fund can loan the money to the general fund. It's like the right hand loaning the left. And as long as there's an agreement in place to pay the money back, then that's completely legitimate. So you're basically borrowing against the asset that you already have is essentially what you're doing.
Now, my understanding of loans from proprietary funds to general fund is that they are for very short-term projects, like, within a year. So the city might have to, manipulate that situation in order to, meet that test. But basically, general fund is short-term for short-term expenses.
Well, actually, and to be clear, it wouldn't go into the general fund. It would go into we also need to create a fund for the library. The library is not going to be paid for out of the general fund. So ultimately, it would be a loan from the sewer capital fund to the library construction fund, if you will, and then the general fund would pay the debt service on paying it back. So it would come out of revenues from the city. That $500,000 would come out of revenues each year. I don't know if that affects the long-term, short-term characteristics of it. I don't know why there would be any restriction on long or short, as long as it was.
Well, there are reserved and unreserved funds, but they're all fairly short-term. So you would probably have to create a new account in the general fund as well, which would be a library, reserved account. In any case, this is a lot of, in the weeds. I don't think people, but yeah, it's not quite as simple as it sounds.
No, and again, it's not. The point is, we have $8.5 million sitting there doing nothing right now. That actually could do something. So why don't we do something with that?
I was hoping that we would get some spirited debate or at least some interchange, and I think that we succeeded in what we set out to do. However, I would like the opportunity for everyone to have a say, and I see that the good doctor was moving her finger towards the microphone there, so why don't we let other people comment if they care to at this time?
Yeah, this is in response to this discussion about the general fund. If it's true that the funds there can be, for the short term, used for something like the library, can they also be used to repair the Pillar Cetus Bridge?
Yes.
Then shouldn't we go to the citizens and say, we've got $8.5 million, kids. What would you like to do with it? That's all.
I think somebody said earlier that we have a lot of good minds in Half Moon Bay, and we need to give them a chance to come forth and try to be creative on solving some of our problems. Maybe we've heard just a little bit about that tonight. A comment, Harvey?
Quickly, David always has interesting ideas. Some of them are good. I don't know. Maybe this would work. My feeling is that the honest way to support this library, I hadn't really known about the sewer fund, is to ask the citizens to support it with a general obligation bond. Now, the city council says, well, that's not good because it won't pass. You need 2/3. Well, if the citizens think that we need a better library, they should be willing to fund it. They should be willing to vote for it. So I think an education campaign with the idea of raising money with geo bonds is the honest way to fund the new library.
Agree with Harvey, but it's also a much more expensive way to fund it. So you could almost do that and then pay off the bonds with the money and then just do it internally anyway. So I mean, I think Harvey's right though. We're being sold the library. We're being told you're either for the library or you're against us. And it's like, it's just, so it needs to be less adversarial and more, is this something we as a community want and need, and then working together to achieve that in whatever way works best for the community.
Are you aware of what's happening here tonight? People are actually reasoning among themselves and coming to consensus on issues. What a novel situation. Okay, now we're going to proceed with the next question here. I will activate my loaned glasses. Question number 4. In 2009, the then interim city manager cut city staff by over 35%. in an effort to reduce short and long-term city expenditures. He did this to get our city a better bond rating for the money the city had to borrow to satisfy the $18 million Beechwood settlement agreement. He accomplished the goal, but also initiated what we have today, a contract city. Question: what are your thoughts on the continuation of that interim city manager's path of reducing city staff for replacement by consultants, and what benefits and drawdowns get your attention? We'll start with Ms. Ruddick on this one.
I don't think outsourcing serves our community. Currently, key positions like planning, engineering, parks and recreation, legal are all outsourced, and people don't live here. They don't, have a stake in the community. They still have public, salaries, very high salaries. Those salaries have benefits. They are private consultants. Trying to get public information from them is virtually impossible. If you have a public agency with public employees, you can file Public Records Act requests and verify that they're being accountable to the city council and to the public. So, and there's plenty of information out there that shows that outsourcing and privatization actually increase costs because of the accountability issue. You can't track costs, you can't get information on them, you can't verify the company's costs. So all in all, it's bad for a lot of reasons. And actually our administrative staff has gone up, and yet there's more and more outsourcing as opposed to having in-house employees. So I think it's a bad deal. I don't think we can count on them to have the same spirit of protectiveness and interest in our city as somebody who's a contract person. And they come and go. There's more turnover. I don't think rapid turnover and frequent turnover is good for people. That said, I don't think they're managing their in-house staff very well either. Their pensions are vesting earlier and earlier. People are coming and staying short periods of time and then leaving for even higher paying jobs and better pensions. So all in all, I don't think they're doing a very good job of managing staff, either outsourced or in-house.
Let's go down a laundry list here and blow up some myths. Mr. Alfano's on record in the paper saying that the police department, going from the police department to the sheriff's department, has saved the city $2 million a year. How about maybe $200,000 a year? The police department, the 3 years moving up to the transition, averaged $3.7 million of annualized cost. The sheriff is averaging $3.2 to $3.5 million. Tony Condotti, city attorney, $685,000 for the last 24 months. $1,000 per day for the city attorney with no significant litigation on the table. CSG, $3.2 million over the last 3 years, $2,800 plus a day for our city engineer. Other than the building right over there, I don't even know that we've built anything in the last 3 years, but that just sort of blows my mind. $2,800 every day, day in and day out. Barbary Coast, the city's public relations firm, $4,000 a month, every month, month in and month out. For what? 2 press releases? There are no ownership of issues. Department heads are not incentivized. If we have a city engineer or a city attorney whose name and butt were on the line for what they did, you'd better damn well believe they'd give you good advice. We've got a city attorney who every time I pick up the phone to call him or I send him an email, just chalks it up, here goes another $500 down the drain. It's insane, people. It's seriously insane. So, has it helped? Yeah, them. This year, our general fund budget is roughly $13 million. That's the 15, right? Okay. So it's roughly 14 and a half. $7+ million are going out the door to consultants. Wow. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have anything new to add to that. I would echo what Debbie and David have said. It's a problem of vested interest. A citizen of our town has a vested interest in the job that they're doing. An outsourced company does not. All they want to do is make money, and they're making money off of our town and off of our neighbors and off of our citizens. So I'm for in-house staff, period.
Just to play devil's advocate here, the city only has 2 employees that are relevant to what has come up. The city attorney is an employee of the city. He's not, and I agree the money is crazy, but, it's outsourcing isn't always bad. Contrary to what David said, that we are saving probably $500,000 a year by having the San Mateo County Sheriff's Department. But in this particular case, we're getting better service than we had with our local police department. When the gang problem arose a couple years ago, they were able to have a big task force that came in. Our local police department couldn't have done that. So outsourcing isn't always bad, but it mostly is bad. And one of the ways of getting around that is to have a head of a department be a city employee, be responsible, but have enough contract services so that it can ebb and flow when the need to do work comes and goes. So it's a mixed bag, and you just have to analyze whether it's better for the city or to do outsourcing on a case-by-case basis. It's not always bad, it often is bad.
Except for my teaching career, I've been a manager all my life. And I know that, and I've been through downsizing companies. I've been the guy that said, see you later to a lot of people. And I know what it is to have people that are loyal to the decision makers and to the, in this case, the city. And that's the ideal situation. You want to work together. There are 2 situations where I think we should outsource. One is when you have something that's really specialized and you don't have the expertise within the city hall to do, or it's a one-time thing, then you should, that makes sense. And the other one is it cost effective to put someone in a full-time position? If you're only doing plan checks for 4 houses a year, I don't think it is. And so you have to go job by job, and as many jobs as you can have in-house, yes, I would say keep them. But the 2 criteria is specialized work and it has to be cost-effective. Thanks.
Okay. This is where we have the 1-minute response available to any comment that was made in answer to that question. So if any of you have a 1-minute comment to something that was said by somebody else, you're more than free to use it at this time.
I want to correct what I said. The city attorney is not an employee. He is a contractor.
I'd like to just point out one thing I've heard from talking to people around town, and that is they feel that community policing has suffered as a result of transferring from a city police department to the sheriff's office. I don't have any experience with that, but that's one of the things I've heard is, less interaction with the high school students, less sort of communicating, in the neighborhoods. I don't know if that's true or not. Another thing I saw recently that concerned me was the city council every year has to update its policy toward conflicts of interest. And until this summer, the city engineer, and I believe it was the city community development director, or one of those, they were required by the city's code and state law to file statements of economic interest so that you could view any of their, their income, their business interests, et cetera. And that's really important to understand their decision making. So the outsourced managers were moved to a category called consultants, even though they're full-time employees. And by doing that, the city manager gets to decide whether or not they have to file these statements of economic interest. So further removing, the public from the accountability factor. And, another reason that the outsourcing is not good, so.
I'd actually like to respond to something that Don Presto said, because I think he's actually hits the nail right on the head. I'm not out to crucify contractors. The point is that the department heads should not have a financial interest. If you've got a job that needs to be done by someone and it's a specific scope and task and this is what we need done, and it's not something that you maintain the infrastructure or the capability of doing on a daily basis because we don't need the overhead, then by all means contract it out. And so, Don really brought that out well. So for all my litany of things that we're spending money on that we don't need to be, there is a role for contractors within our community or within any business, frankly. But it's a limited role, and it's certainly not handing them the keys to the kingdom into their own cookie jar that they can then open up and play with whenever they want.
Yeah, I would just say, as a general practitioner, my job was to look at the problem the patient brought in and do the investigation, do the blood test, do the x-rays, whatever diagnostic studies needed to be done. And then if it was something that was beyond my ken, that's when you call in the specialist. But my job was to do the investigative part first. So I think, of course I'm not against outsourcing if I don't know what I'm doing in a problem, if it's something that's beyond my scope. That's all.
I'd like to give another example where outsourcing was a very good thing, and that is the Coastside Fire Protection District. Most of you voted in the recall election, and we were able to outsource to CAL FIRE the fire protection services for the coastside instead of having a in-house crony-filled system. So there was clearly a savings and better service that we got. So my point, as I mentioned before, is you have to look on a case-by-case basis whether outsourcing makes sense. And in the case of CAL FIRE, it clearly did.
Jim, procedural. Could I suggest that you start with somebody besides one and the other, so the people in the middle don't have to say ditto?
Well, yeah, I tried to switch from side to
Well,
side.
then Debbie's always got to listen to 2 other people. Why don't you start
Otherwise, what happens is everybody has to have a number, you have to keep saying, oh, 3, 5,
Just like, we'll just wait for the table, so I'll answer the next one first, we'll go through, then Dr. Penrose can answer the next one first, and we'll just rotate through that way.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought you were supposed to do, but I guess you guys got kind of unruly. All right, all right.
I've never been accused of being a
All right. I told you our format was a little different tonight, just a little different, okay. So, the next question for our candidates is this one. And we touched on this earlier, but it seemed to draw an emotional response, and it was one of the questions by itself, even though it was kind of part of a question in which we talked about the business community being assaulted by the prospects of parking meters and such, but people really didn't go there. They ended up on this, but we'll revisit it again because it's written down. And we have to stay with, right? Can't deviate. Number 5, on this ballot that got mailed out today, we will see Measure O, a request by the city to extend the 1/2 cent 3-year tax boost that sunsets this year. That boost has generated more than projected to date, providing the city with an additional $3 million plus over the next 3 years. The council members have told us that they need the tax extension to have the funds to repair the newly collapsed Pilicitos Bridge, repair the Main Street Bridge, and most recently to build a new library that is estimated to cost Half Moon Bay between $10 and $15 million. There is no approved plan for the library yet, so the cost is not fixed. Question: would you please share your thoughts on the need for Measure O and how you feel that the funds being asked for going into the general fund as opposed to capital improvements with specific projects? Who did we start with last time?
Jim, since we have really gone over this a lot, I'd like to see what the audience wants in terms of hearing it all again.
Okay, and that's fine because the next question is going to put your friendship to the test. And I have to apologize ahead of time because on some of these questions I did not get the person who asked the question, and I need to know who is posing the question to the individual, because after I ask the question of the individual, then that person can then have a moment to dialogue with that person. So we'll start with an easy one before we... I don't know who gave me this, but would you just identify yourself when I read the question? This is to Harvey. Okay. Do you feel our city is dog friendly? If not, what would you do to make it so? Who posed that question? Okay, thank you. Harvey, turn on your mic.
I have a vested interest in this, in that my dog hates the dog park. It's way too small, and until recently, when the city spent a lot of our money resurfacing it and putting a new fence, it was really awful. Dogs are not allowed on any of the beaches, state park, city-owned. I don't know what the city can do about it. I know that if you go down to the Mavericks or the Moss Beach Hills or some of the beaches, you'll see plenty of unleashed dogs. That's illegal, but they seem to be okay with it. So, as I said, I have this vested interest in allowing dogs more freedom. I know a lot of people disagree with that. So it's a mixed bag, but I think we should let dogs run free whenever it is okay with the public.
Did you want to respond to his comment since you posed the question, or are you satisfied with the answer?
I'm satisfied with the answer, thank you.
Anybody else care to comment on the question that was posed to Mr. Harvey here? I want you to keep that smile on your faces as we go in a little different direction here. Now, again, I'm going to read the question, and I apologize because I did not, at the time it was handed me, get the person who is asking this question, so if you would please identify yourself, I would appreciate it. This question is for Don, and the question is, can you please identify your top 5 campaign donors, and who asked that question? Thank you, sir.
Who asked?
I did.
Probably can't. I can tell you. I know that Kenyatta Cove is probably, they gave me a check. That was probably the biggest amount, was, I believe, $500. And I had a lot of $200 ones from individuals. But I don't remember what Gina Long and the Long family gave me $200. And there were other individuals, but I don't know. Someone's taking care of that for me. I will tell you that I did not, I had offers to talk to people over the hill, to see if they wanted to support me and give me money. I refused to even meet with anybody. I have not met with any interest groups. I have put in close to $1,000 to my campaign out of my own pocket. So that's about a third of what I raised. So I don't really have anybody that's, unless you consider 500 or 200 a lot of money. That's individuals, that's it. Except for the one I just mentioned.
Do you have any follow-up for Don?
Thank you.
Did I say Ocean Colony?
Yeah. Determine
The concerns.
people's concerns of closing access to the main street. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you just read the first sentence again, please?
I will certainly try. If engineers determine that the Main Street Bridge is not worth repairing, how would you support a new bridge, and how would you mitigate people's concerns about the closing of Main Street?
Okay, thank you. The first observation I'd make is that engineers don't determine whether something's worth doing or not. They determine whether something is feasible, technically. It's up to the community or the owner or whoever holds the purse strings to determine anything can be fixed with enough money and enough time. Absolutely anything. We've had so many engineers. I think Jerry's in the room here somewhere. There he is. I mean, the bridge is completely fixable. It's not even, I'm not even willing to entertain the subjective discussion, can it be fixed or can it be fixed? Because I've had enough qualified engineers who have those stamps that they can put on them that have said the bridge can be, quote, fixed. The question is, what is the cost to us as a community, and are we willing to pay that cost? And I think that's what we need to focus on now. We have proscribed by law, through an initiative that I drafted with several others, that the City Council then, I'll politely say, enacted into law. We have prescribed a plan to destroy the Main Street Bridge unless whether the engineers say it's feasible or not, unless the people vote a majority to do that. So at this point, what we need to focus on is how do we return it, or not return it, it's still in service, and what's the most fiscally responsible way to do that. And it's really not that difficult, the problem. For the 5 years we spent wrestling with this, we really could finish this one off pretty quickly, frankly.
Did you have follow-up to that, or are you satisfied with the answer?
I'm satisfied with the answer.
There are other historic bridges in California that have been repaired in such a way as to keep the historic nature of the bridge. The bridge will, if it turns out needs to be seriously repaired, doesn't have to be made into this monstrosity that you may have seen drawings for. It can be kept in its historic state, but just made or just repaired if it's required.
May I, because I asked the question. The question wasn't meant to be, and I want to make this, I wrote up the question pretty quickly. It wasn't meant to be a catchphrase, or I don't want this to be the next big fight in Half Moon Bay. I've been in this room years ago when you couldn't, people outside and they were yelling and screaming and stuff. I know that's not gonna happen over the bridge, but this is an easy thing. If they can be repaired, I'm all for it. But I don't want people to get in one corner or the other over this bridge.
Because I think the question you might have been asking, if I can take a leap of faith here, was if the bridge really needs to be replaced, would I support that? So setting aside for the second that I know that it doesn't, the bridge is the bridge. It's a historically significant artifact that we need to preserve and do everything we can before we flush it down the toilet. If the bridge had some secret flaw that meant it needs to go, well, yeah, I have children that cross that bridge every day, right? I mean, and I think Don's right. We need to, and I think we're getting there, but we need to, and I think that's part of why, you know, my mantra of anyone but the incumbents at this point is so critical, because you're not going to get past these divisions if you don't get the people that sat there for 3 years ignoring the community, which was saying over and over and over and over again, please don't do this, and they just kept going. Thanks.
Does anybody else have a 1-minute response to anything that's being said here? I don't want to leave anybody out. Any final words? Going once, going twice? Okay. So, Dr. Penrose has a question for David.
This is either really good or really bad.
Okay, the question is as follows. With your reputation for strong opinions and being polarized, how can you expect to work with a divided council and collaborate and reach compromise?
That is a fantastic question, and thank you for asking it. There's a myth that sort of goes with the idea that if you're a bit of a maverick or a bit willing to walk to the beat of your own drummer, that you won't play nicely with others. So let's go back for a second and go back to a year ago after I wrote the NRHP nomination, and I then spent, and Lenny Roberts can really address this because she was working side by side with me. For 2.5 months, we worked with Caltrans, and we stopped the city by working with Caltrans. In fact, we work so well with Caltrans, the Caltrans won't talk to us anymore because the city has given them so much crap. The idea that you can't work well with others if you're a maverick, I understand why it's there, but it's not about me. It's not about me forcing my opinion through or my agenda through. I don't have one. All I really want is what we've had tonight, which is a reasoned debate. And the library is a good example. My personal feeling on the library is we should be building a library for the next 40 years, and we're looking at building a library for the last 40 years. The community, more or less at large, has said, we want this library. Okay, so I'll work to try to find a way to buy a library. And so, you know, I'm not saying I can't be occasionally cantankerous, and certainly I walk to the beat of my own drummer, but frankly, that's what we need. We've got 5 people who sit up here and they echo each other. Just every single thing is echo, 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 echo. Oh, we're great, we're funny. Oh, we're great. So, if nothing else, me sitting up here would be entertaining. I'm not sure for how long, but it would have entertainment value. Anyway, I hope that answered your question.
It does, David. Thank you. It's what I expected you to say, and I believe it. Thanks.
So you're satisfied? No follow-up question on that?
No,
And by
no.
the way, have you ever thought about doing voiceovers for cartoons? Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else want to have a comment on that particular question that was posed to David? 1 minute available to anybody who wants to speak to that. Okay. So our last question. And actually, I have to compliment you guys. You actually have handled this pretty well. I thought maybe we'd get a little testy or something, but, you know, they're working well together, aren't they? They play well together. Okay. Okay, so this question is to Don. A question for you, Don. And this comes from your neighbor to your left, Harvey. And Harvey poses the following question. Do you think your previous employment with Keat Nearham, one of the largest developers on the coast, will lead to a conflict of interest when deciding about land use and development?
No. I've been working for Keat Nearham as an employee for over 20 years or so. more than that, yeah, over 20 years. I worked for him for 2 different times. In the 20 years, I've done a little bit of environmental work for him as an independent contractor, obviously, and my own business, but I haven't even done any of that in the last between 5 and 10 years. I've always been a maverick. Even when I worked for him in the 70s, I quit 5 times and got fired 5 times. I take no crap from anyone, you know. So that's just the way it is, and I speak my word. I'm my own man. I think for myself. If he's another citizen, just like anybody else out there, and if they make a good point, I'll take that into consideration. If it's hyperbole or something else, then I won't. And it doesn't make any difference who it is. I have friends. I have friends all over the place. And the answer is no.
So Harvey, do you have a follow-up?
No, I accept Don's answer.
Okay, our 7th and last question, and it looks like we will have a chance to open it up to questions from the audience, so get the old mind rolling there. Okay, the question is, where did we start last time? I'm getting confused here in my old age. Who's first? And then which direction did we move from there? So we're going to do kind of like a pool shot off the side, and we're going to go here and then back there. Well, just for you, we'll do that, okay? Because I know that that's raised, and they want to see something different, okay? All right, here we go. See, we can be agreeable here. You know, we're all working together for harmony. Question number 7 is: where do you see Half Moon Bay at the end of your 4-year term, should you be elected?
That's a great question. My hope is that we get a council which can work together, kind of the way we work together tonight. We've got a lot of different opinions here, a lot of different personalities here, a lot of alphas here. We've got a lot of citizens. If we get more citizen participation, I think we can make a very big dent in some of our infrastructure problems. I think we can encourage business development on the coast here, especially in our downtown. I think we can encourage moderate income housing and co-housing, tiny housing, so that we don't have 78% of our population commuting over the hill. I think we can make a dent in the traffic congestion problem. We've got lots of people. When I was pounding the pavements this past couple of days, talking to people, what I heard from a lot of them was traffic, 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 traffic. And I know it impacts me as well as everybody else, even though I don't drive and I walk downtown. But I wouldn't think of leaving here on a weekend unless it was early in the morning or late at night, or coming home. Lots of ideas from lots of people. Maybe they're feasible, maybe they're not. But if we take it on as a city, and as citizens and neighbors in that city, then we can come up with something that's going to make a dent in the problem. Maybe it's public school busing, maybe it's shuttle busing over the hill. Lots of ideas. Maybe it's traffic guards at Limos and Pastorino Farms. I don't know. But the problems can be solved if we work together. We've got lots of amazing local talent here.
Thank you, Margaret.
I agree with almost everything Dr. Penrose just said about the direction we need to go. I want to just add something to the mix. Within the next 2 years, we're going to have to provide the Coastal Commission with an updated general plan for the city in 20 years. Okay, and it's extremely important that we work to preserve open space, that we don't allow development willy-nilly on the planned unit development, that we encourage development and housing in the downtown corridor where it belongs, where it makes sense, that we encourage housing that is low impact and is at least below market rate so that people can afford to live here. And we don't want to have 60s styles housing developments, which, if we let the general plan go in the direction which it seems to be going in, is what's going to end up on the bluffs. And we can't have that. So it's extremely important that we get this general plan submitted with a direction that encourages the kinds of beauty that we moved here for in the first place.
Four years is a long time, but sometimes in politics, in government, it's not a long time. You heard me say in the beginning that I want to you spend our money wisely for the benefit of our residents, including myself. And I want this to be, the library being one, the Boys and Girls Club is being built. I like to do some things, start a dialogue on traffic with the state and the county to try to alleviate a couple of projects, kind of alleviate some of the traffic. But I really want to establish the dialogue in 4 years from now. I would like to have it is, what are we doing for ourselves? What are we doing to make life better, the quality of life better for our residents? There is no, I read the Coastal Act back in 1975. It designates Half Moon Bay as a growth area. And look at it, they were right. And there's no reason why we have to, every weekend, we accommodate many people, and during the week now, accommodate a lot of people. And we do it willingly, and there's no reason why we don't have the same amenities that they do over the hill. And I'll give you one example, is Smith Field. If that's not done after 4 years of electing me, I will resign. In fact, if it's not done in the next 2 years, I won't run again, but I'll personally run someone against whoever the incumbents are, whether it's these folks or somebody else, because I want that fixed. Okay? That's what all I want to do, is preserve what we have and make a quality of life better for now and into the future. Generations forget, we keep kicking the can down the road. It's time to buck up and do it. Thank you.
I think this election is about trust, about who you trust to run your community. And what I would like to see, if I were sitting up here at the end of 4 years, I'd like to be at a meeting and look out into the audience and see fresh faces, you know, younger faces, instead of the usual suspects who have been in the audience for as long as I've been in politics here, 25 years. It's pretty much the usual suspects. So it would be great to have people, new people come forward who are interested in other than just, you know, having their sidewalk fixed or whatever, but interested in the broader issues facing the city and willing to participate. And I don't think they will if they don't feel like they can trust their elected officials and city staff to do the right thing. So I think to build trust, we need to have a really open system. I think that we need a more open budget process, a better budget document that explains what's going on. It's our chief policy document. It should be readable. It should invite participation. It should be understandable where the money's going and, you know, where it's coming from. I think that we need to do more planning with our citizens, like perhaps neighborhood plans would be a good way to get people involved at the neighborhood level, speaking with each other, identifying their needs, and perhaps doing fun things together. I think vibrant neighborhoods are really important. There are, you know, vacant lots throughout our neighborhoods. Maybe community gardens serve one, maybe a pocket park, maybe a place to walk your dog. But I think if we start at the neighborhood level, you know, we can start building some community. I think it would be really important that we do finish the general plan, because I think our growth issues are very pressing. And if we don't get a handle quickly on where we're going to allow growth and where and how we're going to have housing, diverse housing for a lot of different populations, we're going to get stuck. We're going to be reactive. It's going to be expensive. And once stuff is on the ground, we're not going to be able to call it back. So I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think planning is really important. So those are important to me.
Thank you, David.
Since the incumbents aren't here, I'm going to take 30 seconds and speak for them. 4 years from now, if the incumbents are reelected, the Podesta property right up here is going to have 100, 250, I don't know, houses on it, right? Other properties and PUDs will have been opened up for development in the community. And going back to what people said earlier, the traffic is already at capacity. So if you don't solve the traffic problem first, what in God's name are you thinking about developing properties while you're thinking about $50 million of profit? Okay, we get it. In my view of the city 4 years from now, we have a greater ability to house people, but we've done it by doing more or less what Debbie was just saying, which is we've filled the infill lots in. We've used the space that we have all around us here that's being wasted right now, that's full of empty lots, that are ugly eyesores and everything else. We use the resources we've got within the constraints of the transportation system that we've got. I said this at the last meeting, or the last forum, 92, we don't own. So unless the city's going to, or the city, I'm sorry, unless the county's going to build us a 6-lane highway, it is what it is. It's not going to change. And we need to learn to live within those means. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's just, you can't take any more cars than we've got here and shove them down 92 every morning and not have a traffic jam. Dr. Penrose has keyed on something that I've said to a bunch of people for a while, which is school buses. Every single school bus that brings kids to school is 60 to 100 cars a day that would be off that intersection. Right? I think school buses, it would be one of my primary initial objectives is to work with the school district. Is it our problem? Not necessarily, but we're the ones who are stuck in traffic, so why don't we work together to try to solve it? And in the end, I'd like to see a community that doesn't live, that's represented by people that are representative of the community and not the narrow interests of a few very small, fairly wealthy developers. Thank you.
Well, I think you all did a pretty good job with staying within your time limits. Thank you for that. We do have a few minutes. We started late. We started a few minutes late, so I don't know if you want to indulge us and make up for that a little bit past 9 o'clock and how much you want to stick to that. But we're going to open it up now for questions from the audience. So I ask a couple of things. Number one, the question that you ask, regardless if you ask it to an individual or you ask it to the group, will be able to be responded to by everybody, and everybody will have 1 minute to respond to whatever question, so we can try to maximize the input for the audience. And finally, I would ask that you would speak up. Hands raised. I know you're ready to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, when Yanira Serrano Garcia was murdered in our community, I want to know what public actions or public statements you made after that in response. And secondly, in your outreach to the Hispanic community, what do you feel are what do they tell you are the most important issues facing them? I haven't heard anyone address that.
Could you repeat the question?
You're asking a lot, aren't you? Yes, if you come to the podium, like they do at city council meetings. How's that?
Charles Nelson, Half Moon Bay. When Yanira Serrano Garcia was murdered in our community, I want to know what action or comments publicly you made as individuals. And secondly, as you have gone out to the Latino community here, what issues do they tell you that are important to them, and how would you represent them for the community?
Okay, I'm sorry, I just took over. I guess it's my alpha male stuff. I did say, when one of the questions to the newspaper asked, I think that it was published, how did I feel that the sheriff's office was doing, replacing the police department, and I said, generally, yes, that they were doing a pretty good job, but that her death didn't have to happen. And that was my comment. And and to give a little bit of body to that, is that I don't blame so much the police officer, and I don't blame so much the sheriff's office. I think it's been going on for many years now, about 20 years. It started with the gangs, the drug gangs with weapons, and police felt outgunned, and now with 9/11 we become almost paranoid, and it's shoot first attitude sometimes if they feel the slightest bit threatened, and I think that has to be a societal thing. The other thing is, I was talking to Hispanics today, and they really support the library. That's one thing. And I see my time is up. Is that correct?
Yes, this is 1 minute, and again, it's to give everybody an opportunity. And I know that politicians can wax eloquent, and that's, that goes with the territory, but I'm going to ask you to be as pithy as possible so that 5 times quickly. So anyway, Harvey, if you would continue on.
The review asked what we thought about the police department, and unfortunately we had 50 words, but 25 words. If we had 50 words, what I had said was that I think in this particular case, the police department acted hastily and without preparation, and if you've read the recent reaction, they are forming a new psychiatric unit which will respond in a better way. So that's good. It's bad. It's horrible what happened. We hope it never happens again. But we have to learn from this murder and carry on with a reaction that addresses mental illness issues.
Yeah, I agree with Harvey. And I don't really agree with Don. It's not really a gang-related problem, nor is it a problem with communication between the Latinos in our community and the non-Latinos. It's an unfortunate incident, a very sad incident. Hopefully the psychiatric unit in the sheriff's office is going to get the sheriff's better trained to deal with a situation like that. And I went to the Hispanic Community Center to listen to the general plan being presented. And I came back feeling very disappointed. There were maybe 25 people there. Most of them spoke English, some of them did not. They had a translator, which was good. I asked the question, after they talked about how they wanted lower rents and they wanted the rest, other things, I asked the question, what about bicycle paths? Nobody wanted bicycle paths. Well, to me that means that the people that went to that meeting did not represent the Latino community. Anybody in town has seen Latinos riding on the bicycles on the sidewalks because there are no bicycle paths. I think if we really want to get the Latino community involved and feeling a part of this community, you got to do it better than that.
Thank you. David?
For someone who speaks up on just about everything, at least in talk about in other places, I deliberately did not say anything in the wake of the affair because I did not feel it was my place. I am not Latino. To put myself with an opinion in the shoes of the people that were experiencing that event, it was not where I belonged, and I did not wish to insert myself in that process. Having said that, I think that what we're seeing is the direct result of the militarization of our police forces post 9/11. We're seeing a threat matrix, an escalation matrix that allows for no common sense or wiggle room. The officer, in my mind, was completely justified in shooting her, but I kind of agree with Harvey. It was murder, not necessarily by him, but by the society that condoned and signed off on the process in place. The last thing I'll offer is
Rick Walchick's response was to reach out to the Latino community after that and form his group and committee, which is great. I understand that there is a third of our community, 32% of our community is Latin American or Latino descent. It wouldn't take me 4 years and this event to actually understand that. I already know that. That's why I didn't say anything in the first place.
Thank you, David. And by the way, I should just say that I believe, unless otherwise stated, that the candidates will be available to talk one-on-one should you wish to delve into any of these things a little bit more. Deborah?
My response to the review was that I felt after reading the various documents and reports that the officer involved had not gone through crisis intervention training. He was relatively new, maybe 9 months, and still hadn't had that training. So I think that seemed to me to be an issue, and I remarked about that to the review. In general, I think it appears to me after reading and watching TV that our police have become very reactive, somewhat trigger happy, and militarized. And I think a better policy is first do no harm. You know, we expect that of our doctors. I think we should expect that of our police and public safety officials as well. And that was very disturbing to me. Speaking to the Hispanic community, I hear that they would like and enjoy parks. You can go to almost any park in any of our neighborhoods and find that they're heavy users of our parks and recreation. I have heard library as well, but they like recreational activities that involve families and that have something for everybody, where they can play games and picnic and that sort of thing. Talking about public participation, they don't seem to be very interested. On the other hand, I don't think we invite it either. Our meetings are held in English. We don't have translators. We don't translate our staff reports into Spanish. So it seems to me that we have a very large disenfranchised community here.
Thank you, Deborah.
30% of the population is.
I have one more, I have to say this, excuse me. Someone accused me of saying that this action happened because of gangs. I did not say that. I did not. Did everybody understand that? Okay, thank you.
Now, this is difficult because we have allowed 2 minutes for each person to have final statements. 2 times 5, boys and girls, is 10. 10 minutes puts us where? Past 9 o'clock, don't you know? So basically, if we were to do that right now, we're already after 9 o'clock. And if we continue with the public questions, I see several hands, and we could probably go on and on. So,
A statement.
you want to forbear? You want to give up your 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, how good. Okay.
How many of you want to listen to me prattle on for 2 minutes?
You know what they're going to say, don't you? You know. Okay. So another question. The lady here, come to the microphone, please.
Okay. So many of you seem to be against Measure O. To me, one of the things about it is that since I've been living here, other than the hardware store, I haven't actually purchased anything in any store other than going into a restaurant. And I think that's true of a lot of people, frankly. I don't think I'm the only one. I am not necessarily looking for stores to be here that I would go into. Like, I don't want a Costco here. But so, you know, so a lot of those stores do get the tourist dollars. My question to you is about tourism, our biggest industry here in Half Moon Bay. We do end up mostly with garbage, as far as I'm concerned. My Sam's Chowder House. But how do we get those dollars of these people using all our facilities, our roads, our throwing garbage around so that we residents end up picking it up? How do we get those dollars into our community to better our own community so that we have a partnership with this industry that is so critical to Half Moon Bay? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to jump in and go first on this one if I could. I never did get to go first, for what it's worth. Mine was the Measure O that got tanked, and then that was it. So
Anyway, now, Okay. This is a question that is going to be responded to by each of you, right? So are you saying you want to go first?
Let me in.
Okay.
Remember the ball, remember...
All right, okay. Bowing to pressure once again. You may go first, then Deborah, then we'll take the ricochet shot down to Don.
D. First thing,
1 minute.
First thing people don't understand is that the biggest contributor in sales tax, we've all paid. When you buy a car, I don't care if you go to New Mexico to buy your car, when you register it here, you pay the sales tax. So that 0.5% or that 1%, we're all paying it, folks. And cars make up by percentage the biggest chunk of any sales tax increase. Second thing to understand is between tourism occupancy tax and sales tax, they collectively make up almost 70% of our gross revenue going into the general fund. So 70% of everything we spend on a day-to-day basis as a community is coming from people outside the community already. To me, this isn't meant to you towards your question is brilliant. It's a specious argument, this idea that Measure O is going to let people come in and spend money in our community and we're going to get a piece of it. It just isn't true, is the bottom line. It's a tool to allow them to do things that we've discussed at length, and he's reaching for the pink card.
Well, it seems to me our general fund is the right place to take money and spend it on upkeep, not just of our roads and our sidewalks, which are really important, but our trails, our parks, picking up trash. I think if you keep your place in tip-top condition, it makes it a pleasant experience for tourists, and more might come and might spend more money. So I think we have to make an investment in our community to make it an attractive place. I do agree with David. I think we're maxed out on TOT. We're at the highest rate, I think, in California at the moment. Certainly the council could consider things like Airbnb tax, perhaps. San Francisco has either levied one or has put it before the voters. But I think we've pretty much tapped it out. We can make it more attractive and have them spend more money, invest in our businesses so that we have more businesses that can, attract the tourist dollar. But I think it's a more comprehensive approach that we need to take to capture that dollar.
Thank you, Don.
I agree with everything that's been said. And I thought I heard part of your question was how do we get more people spending money on Main Street other than restaurants? And that's a tough one. That's beyond, I don't know how people make it in those small shops. And they do. You go and we know we have spaces empty. So the right people that feel like that they know what they can sell, they have to find the right mix to bring people there. But I agree, we're pretty well maxed out on the TOT and the sales tax, and God, I mean, this is a beautiful place. That's why they come. They don't come here to buy Cheerios and stuff, pop purees and stuff. So I don't know what to say.
I can't really add anything to what David and Debbie said, so I won't.
I just want to say one thing, and that is, I've been hearing from people that live over the hill that they no longer want to come here because of traffic. So I hate to beat a dead drum, or whatever that phrase is, but until we deal with the traffic congestion problem, we're not going to be dealing with increasing tourist money here in town. The second thing I would say is, if we're talking about businesses on Main Street, then why don't we talk to the people on Main Street, the business owners on Main Street, and find out what their ideas are. That's all.
It's always hard when you come to the end, and I could have one more question, and that would have to wrap it up, because we did tell the good people here that we would be out by 9, so we're kind of extending our time. So, do we want to take one more question, or do we want to say goodnight? One more. I have one. Who wants to be brave and raise your hand? Does anybody have something, a burning question that you just have to have satisfied tonight? Okay, if you'll come up. This will be our last.
Hi, I just want want to know how we can guarantee that all citizens and all entities in this community are treated equally when it comes to issues like CDPs. And, you know, whether you're the Boys and Girls Club or CUSD or Keaton Urhan or whomever, that there is equal treatment under the law, that the local coastal plan cannot be ignored just because of who you are.
And Don, why don't you start a little?
I agree with that. I agree that if you have a professional staff who, that as city council members, we set policy and the staff should carry out our policies. And the policy should apply to everybody equally, everyone equally. Now, that doesn't mean that every situation is the same. And so once you get in the process, the outcomes might not be the same. They may be different based on a whole bunch of other factors, but they should be treated equally going in, for sure.
We have a long and venerable tradition in this town of unequal treatment, of favoritism, of cronyism, of allowing the people with influence and the power to run the show. And I can give you one example where a citizen in the Casa del Mar neighborhood was totally demonized by the county for doing the right thing, for obeying the law. And the city council seems to think that he's an antichrist. And we just can't have that kind of treatment of our citizens and ignoring of the law. So if we get the incumbents out, then we'll be in a position where everyone will be treated equally, and we will get the Coastal Act and the LCP amended, and we will have it enforced fairly and equally.
When you have a government that is closed and not transparent, then it's not inclusive. Now you have to ask the citizens to participate. The only way the citizens are going to get what they need is by asking for it. But it's our job as a council to open up enough so that people feel they can come forward. I don't think it's difficult. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. I don't know exactly how we do it, but I do know that citizens task forces as one approach to it. But mostly it's about having an attitude that you're going to open your ears, you are going to listen, and have people understand that not everybody's going to get what they want, that it's going to be compromised. People will not be so angry or so polarized if they felt they've negotiated something instead of being told what's going to happen.
As a practical matter, the answer to your question is painfully simple. Do not vote for the two missing seats to the right of me. They represent a narrow band of interests. All 5 council members do, and I can't speak more bluntly than that. If you want to change it, then you got 4 people, 5, I can't count tonight, but to choose from, pick someone else.
Going back to my introductory statement, this is where I think, very carefully crafted policies are really important. If policies are too broad, there's way too much wiggle room, and then you're really open to influence peddling. So you need to be very clear about what your policy is and very detailed, I think. And then you have to be careful about how much authority you delegate to staff. You have to set the bar at just the right point so that the planning staff, for instance, planning director, can't make calls that really should be made by the planning commission or city council. So you have to very carefully set the bar whereby there's delegation of authorities to staff or acceptance of those authorities by the city council. I think those are really important. And if people are clear on the policy and clear on the procedures and staff knows, very clearly what they can and cannot do, it becomes harder and harder to game the system. So I'm all for openness, transparency, and very, very clear direction and goals.
Thank you. And a big thank you to all of our council candidates this evening, and thank you for coming.
And thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
And now get out and vote.
Yeah.
No, I grew up in Mattapan and then to Newton. And then, yeah, can't hide.